Mr. President, members of the legislature, in order that I can understand what is going on, I would like to ask Senator White a question.
Senator White, would you yield to a question from Senator Chambers?
Yes, I will, sir.
Senator White, is this the great compromise that has been discussed?
No, Senator. This is, like most compromises, really not that palatable to anybody.
So this is not the one that Senator Mine...
Oh, it is. I'm
this
sorry.
Is Senator Mine.
I thought you were just asking if it was a great deal.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's all I will ask. Members of the legislature, as happened when this bill was discussed the last time, I did not participate in the discussion. I wanted to listen and see if my colleagues had learned anything about how things are done when significant legislating is underway. I heard some notions that are very parochial, narrow-minded, and limited. When rights are discussed, that debate ought to deal with those things that are grand, that are expansive, that have significance to the human condition. When you talk about rights that are going to be found in the pantheon of those, for example, unalienable human rights, you're not going to find smoking among them. You're not going to find what is called the right to foul and pollute the air that other people breathe. You're not going to find a so-called right to be uncivil, rude, and coarse. You're not going to find what Senator White tried to argue so forcefully for yesterday, the right to have an addiction and impose your weakness on other people. Those who are going to buy that argument today are going to argue about the need for people to assume personal responsibility when we get to other matters. These smokers don't want to assume the personal responsibility for their individual personal weakness. Instead, they want society to accommodate them. Why make cars have devices to restrict the amount of exhaust that goes into the atmosphere? It's your car. You should be able to do what you want to with it. Senator White's talking about how great these local political subdivisions are. There are people who have been involved in politics longer than Senator White, who have observed the way various city councils have been bullied into granting liquor licenses which ought not to have been granted, and people would have to go to the state, and sometimes the state would not grant the license because it should not have been granted. So there is nothing about local government which is worthy of the kind of accolades that Senator White was laying out this morning. It is easier to bully a local subdivision, and that's why when it comes to guns and other things, the special interest groups want to leave it to the locals and not allow the state to preempt. I heard somebody talking in a very parochial way the other day. It was almost like the attitude of a small town, narrow-minded mayor who deals with small things like dogs barking, people not shoveling their snow, and will not realize that when we come to this legislature, we are the lawmakers. What we do goes into the statute books, not in some little ordinance book, which is so complicated to the locals that they hire outside agencies to revise their ordinance books. And as a result, there are contradictory ordinances in their ordinance books. I've seen it happen. In Omaha, which is the largest municipal government in the state, I heard somebody talking about, don't let the government be sticking their nose in people's business. Well, I saw where in New York the government stuck its nose in the business of KFC, the ones who run Kentucky Fried Chicken, because in one of their restaurants the people loved rats. And they allowed the rats to have the run of the place just like the two-footed rats. And the government came in, stuck their nose in that man's personal business, and shut it down. When people talk about property rights, they don't even know what they're talking about. They need to take an elementary course in the limitations on the rights that a person has
Time.
to property. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, I would like to ask Senator White a question or two, since he seems to be a strong advocate of personal rights.
Senator White, would you yield to a question?
I would.
Senator White, do you believe there is such a thing as a female human being?
I think there are human beings, Senator.
Do you think there are female human beings in the state of Nebraska?
I think there are human beings, some of whom are male and some of whom are female.
Do you believe that a female has the right to use her body in the way she chooses?
Well, I guess you can't answer anything completely openly like that, so I guess I would say, in general, yes.
Does a woman have a right to engage in sex with whomever she pleases if she is of age?
No, she doesn't. She does not have the right to engage in sex with minors. She does not have the right to engage in sex if she contains communicable diseases that could injure others.
So let's remove minors and let's remove communicable disease.
That's the problem with big principles, Senator. We start out with a mountain and we end up with a pile of sand.
Let's continue, though, because we want to get down to the nub of this right that a woman would have.
Some of us wish to get to the nub. Others of us are just tap dancing, Senator.
Senator White, Senator Fred Astaire White, does a consenting woman have a right to engage in sex with a consenting man? These are both adults.
Under certain circumstances, for example, not in public, certainly she does.
If they are in their own bedroom, in the privacy of their bedroom or a hotel room?
Well, yes, unless they're smoking, in which case, given the original bill, we could break the door down to find out.
Since you're one who believes in right, you're doing an awful lot of temporizing, which I'm going to try to get you away from, but since I won't, I'm going to deal with the issue because Senator White does not want to answer the questions, and I'm not going to waste all of my time. That's all I'll ask you, Senator White.
Thank you, Senator.
He might know what I'm getting to, and he may not. He is so defensive about the fallacious arguments he has given that he is afraid to put himself in a position where he might think their falsity will be clear even to him and it will come out of his own mouth. But I'm not going where he thinks I'm going. If a woman engages in sex with a man and she doesn't charge money for it, it's not against the law. If she gives sex free, it's not against the law. She can have sex with 10 men in a day, and it's not against the law. But if she charges $1, then that is called prostitution, and it's against the law. So what the men who govern this society have said, if a woman is willing to give herself and her favors free to a man, it's not against the law. But if she's going to earn money doing it, then it's against the law. Then it's against the law. That's the hypocrisy that we deal with. And Senator White probably knew where I was going, and he knew that it would show the falsity of all these nonsensical things he's saying. Smoking is not a right that is untouchable. It's a right as long as the state allows it. It's not a human right. It's not a right that a person has because he or she is a human being. But why is it that if a woman gives her body away, men say, that's all right and it's not against the law? But if she's going to earn money, then men have passed laws that say it is against the law. Why is that? Because this is one of the most hypocritical societies you can find. And Senator White has sat there with all his knowledge and let these nonsensical statements be made about personal property when he knows that ownership of property is like a bundle of sticks. You have certain of those sticks which are yours. Others are in the hands of the state or society at large. You never own property absolutely. If you own property absolutely, nobody could even tax it. You could not have a village taxing the king's castle. You could not have a group of earls and dukes and put all of them together and they would tax the king's lands? The king owns everything.
Time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Donald, thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature. And at this point on this issue, I've got to say, like I do on my program when I take a call, friends, I start brothers, sisters, friends, enemies, and neutrals. I've got to lay on what these opponents keep saying. Senator White wants to elevate an addiction to the level of a right, to impose a nasty habit upon others, to impose somebody's weakness and flaw upon others, rather than make them assume personal responsibility for their flaw, for their addiction, and keep it away from others. He wants to say they have the right to impose it on others, and those others have no right to speak against it. That is preposterous. He knows, though he may not admit it, that the state has what are called police powers. These powers put the state in a position to enact laws to protect the health and the welfare of the citizenry at large. We are not a village board. We are not a city council. We are not a PTA. We are not a high school debate society. And people stand up here and talk about their little feelings getting hurt because they're chastised when they make a statement, meaning they think everybody's got to go along with them even when they make no sense. Maybe on the city council, or maybe a small-town mayor can expect that from his small-town parochial friends. But that's not going to happen on the floor of the legislature. If you jump in the ring, what did the referee say in every fight you've ever seen on television? Protect yourselves at all times. Don't get in here and you got the gloves on and you want to punch somebody, then you don't want them to punch back. I expect people to deal with me the way I deal with them. Now, Senator White is not the one that I have in mind when I'm saying people get up here and whine about being chastised and disagreed with.
1 minute.
But Senator White is very disingenuous in some of the positions that he takes. And we're going to discover that as we get to other issues during the session. If he indeed thinks that people's addiction gives them rights to impose a hurtful practice on others, then that should be his philosophy throughout. But it's that way, I'm sure, only when it comes to smoking. I haven't heard my friend Senator Christensen speak today. But he believes in the state meddling in people's business. He thinks the state should stick his nose into the issue when two people can get married and put a fine on them if they don't do it the way he thinks they ought to do it. Now, you tell me that's not the government sticking its nose in people's business? And I have a few more things that I intend to say, and I'm not going to be upset if somebody challenges me or attacks me. If I can't stand this heat, I shouldn't be in the kitchen. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I'm going to support the movement of this bill to select file. I tried to vote for the amendment that was just before us, but I couldn't. My finger simply wouldn't go to that green button, so it slipped over to the red and voted no, but it was inconsequential because there were more than enough votes to adopt the amendment. Senator White understands as a lawyer that the opposing counsel is going to analyze, evaluate, and attack the fallacious, weak, wrong-headed position of the lawyer on the other side. And all of those words that I use describe what Senator White has been doing on this bill. First of all, I didn't say he suggested that the addiction to smoking or smoking itself is a constitutional right. I said they're trying to elevate it to the level of a right. Not just to be addicted, not just to smoke. You have a right to be stupid. Senator White pointed that out early on. but you don't have a right to inflict the consequences of your stupidity on others. I tell you again, in Omaha, I can't burn leaves that fall off my trees on my own property. That property is mine. The trees are mine. The leaves are mine. But when those leaves fall to the ground and I rake them in a pile, I cannot burn them without being in violation of the law. So where does my right to private property go? Senator White knows what I'm talking about when I suggest that there are people on this floor who do not understand the limits to what is called private property. He allows that ignorance to go forward. Those of us who know better have an obligation to share our knowledge with our colleagues. There are matters related to farming which I don't know as much about as my colleagues. And I'm not resentful when they explain to me things that happen in farming which may have a bearing on what we're doing as legislators. I appreciate the fact that they bring the information, but it shouldn't be false. I follow the methodology that I think is appropriate for me to use on the floor of this legislature. Other people can choose to do what they want to, but I'm not going to just sit back and let what they say go by without challenge when I think it's fallacious. Smoking needs to be banned in the way that the original form of 395 contemplates. But sometimes to be strategic means that you give up a tactical position. Tactics relate to these little brush fires. Strategy relates to the overall plan for fighting the war. You can lose a tactical battle without in any way weakening your ability to win the war. You might even allow that to happen, to make your opponent show what he has got. So, Senator Johnson is thinking strategically this morning. You all have heard the children's rhyme, "He who laughs and runs away will live to laugh another day." They say that a live dog is better than a dead lion. And that's true.
1 minute.
What has happened on this bill is the power of the tobacco industry and the terrible devastation it wreaks on this society being made manifest. I have family members who have smoked and some who still do. But you think I'm going to do what I can to facilitate that? I don't preach to them about what they do because they're grown, but don't let them ask me. Don't let them do it in a set of circumstances where it's appropriate for me to comment, but they know what my view is. And I will never do what Senator White is trying to do here. Make these addicted people feel like they don't have to take responsibility for their flaw, for their failing, for their coarsening of society, for their incivility. They blow smoke where other people have to breathe who do not smoke, and they think they have the right to do it.
Time.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Senator Stoopman, thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, we're dealing with as critical a public health problem as we will confront. And it's being discussed by some people in the same way you would discuss the right, if you want to call it that, to license a vehicle. And when it comes to driving a car, courts have said that's a privilege, not a right. Some of us have seen the ravages of cancers produced from smoking. Others have not. Yul Brynner, the late Yul Brynner, portrayed roles on the screen of the virile, macho man. But he was weak. He could not resist the thing that would take his life. So what he did, because he was too weak to overcome that devastating habit of smoking, was to make a public service spot that would be played on television only after that demon tobacco had taken his life. And he started with words to the effect, when you see this, or if you see this, I am no longer here. I am dead. And what killed me is smoking. But he didn't have the strength to resist it. Smoking meant more to him than life itself. There are people to whom smoking means more to them than life itself. Take your own life. You can do that. It's right there in the Constitution. If you have the right to life, you have the right to give up your life. Jesus told you you can give up your life. But he didn't say give it up to tobacco. He said if you give up your life for your friend. He didn't say take the life of your friend through your addictive, lethal habit. What people are arguing on this floor is that those people who manifest incivility should feel nothing is wrong with it, when to do so is to put in jeopardy not just the health, but the life of other people who have not done anything to harm them. But they will do the harm. They perform the work of a pathogen, of a virus, of a bacterium. Tell me a single disease in this country that kills as many people as smoking does. They are more virulent than anthrax bacillus. And they're proud of it. They walk around here saying, I got the right to smoke whenever I want to, wherever I want to, by God. Then these other sniveling people who know better say, well, that's right. They have a right to smoke. I don't think so. And I will speak my mind without apologizing, because they are disregarding the health and the rights of others.
1 minute.
And have people on this floor talking about, what do you do next? Ban drinking? That's that juvenile, adolescent nonsense. People have to understand that now they have graduated from elementary school when they get into the legislature. Tom Osborne found out that when he left coaching in Nebraska and went to the U.S. House, he was just one of 435. And did nothing of any consequence while he was there. But in Nebraska, he's a demigod. Well, maybe if you're a mayor or a member of the village board in your little corner of the meadow, you're a big duck in a little pond. Here, you're a water bug on the surface of Lake Michigan. You got to grow up. You got to improve your mind. Use your brains. Use your brains.
Time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members of the legislature, if this paper signified LB 395 and it's about to move, I'd say, in the words of the bard, ah, parting is such sweet sorrow. I have one more opportunity to speak on this bill at this point, and I intend to do that. And then I won't have any further comments on the bill while it's on general file, unless somebody just provokes me. There have been many attempts to regulate smoking, and some have been successful in local communities, others have not. The state, by enacting this bill in the appropriate form, will declare a public policy that relates to the health of all the state's residents, citizens, non-citizens, visitors, and anybody who happens to be within the borders of this state for any reason or purpose whatsoever. When the state declares that policy, it ought to embrace all of the people, not just those who have an enlightened governing board or body who will protect their health. It should embrace everybody within the state. So when this bill gets to select file and the debate resumes, I will not support this so-called opt-out provision. Our responsibility as the legislature is to enact general laws. The health of people when it comes to breathing secondhand smoke, whether those people live in Scottsbluff or in Omaha, will not be different. The people in Scottsbluff run just as great a risk. Those in Red Cloud, those in Sioux City, those in Norfolk, those in Brownville, wherever they live in this state, the same threat to their health from secondhand smoke will exist. The same threat to the health of employees will exist.